Tesla shares have tanked, and so has Elon Musk's net worth. He lost $29 billion in one day. He's still the world's richest man, but his foray into government isn't going as smoothly as he'd like.
This was no ordinary victory. This was a fork in the road of human civilization. The chainsaw for bureaucracy.
If the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have?
How are you running your other businesses?
With great difficulty.
He said, you know, Elon, I don't like what's happening to you, and Tesla's a great company. I don't like what's happening. Thank you.
So he did get the presidential endorsement, but the question is, can his other many businesses survive Elon Musk's politics? It's what we're discussing today on News Desk. I'm Biresh Banerjee.
And I'm Jared Reid. Hi, everyone. I'm going to be looking at your questions and comments today that you're posting in the community chat and bringing them into the conversation here. We've had some already in our community post. Tefi Club has written, I used to want a Tesla, not anymore. Andrew Kreisel has said, the fall in Tesla stock this week doesn't constitute a hit, which is what we called it in our community post. He's saying leaving him the richest man in the world isn't a hit. He's the same and will be the same until we change the misguided kind of economic policies we live by. And another one, finally, a man as rich and successful as Elon isn't looking for money anymore. He's looking for a purpose.
Thanks so much for that, Jared. Keep those comments coming in. It's what keeps the discussion alive. Speaking of a discussion, we need people to have a discussion, and it's time to introduce you to the big table. Joining us for the first time on a News Desk this time round, Kassandra Sundt, DW Business Correspondent. Welcome, your first News Desk. You'll be providing us some context on Elon Musk's many businesses and how that is doing in the face of his, let's say, his activities in government. Welcome, Kassandra. To Kassandra's right, Pablo Foley alias, a known hand on News Desk, will be providing us some context on how Elon ended up where he is now. That's going to be interesting. Michelle Stockman is not visible, but she is sitting with our technical crew making this show possible. Also, somebody else who is visible, Cherry Chan, who's going to be in the chat talking to you guys.
Like always, yeah. And of course, I have a poll question for everyone, like every week. This week, we are asking, what's Elon Musk really after in politics? There are 4 options: pushing his own ideology, furthering his business, gaining power and control, or shaping civilization. Don't forget to vote, and we'll talk about the result later, right? Yeah,
later in the show, in the discussions. There is enough time. You can make up your mind and go ahead and vote. I've never ever voted for one of these polls, right? I just realized maybe I should do it this time around. I've just been too busy with the show and the questions. Maybe you tip the
balance. I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know. Maybe today's time to do it. I don't know.
Are you allowed to vote?
Please, you guys do vote. But let's begin with some context. We spoke about Pablo Foley alias. He is going to give us some context on how Elon Musk has ended up where he is now. It's been a very hectic past few days and a very hectic month and a half. What is going on with Elon Musk?
All right, well, I think the best is to start, of course, with that event that took, I'm calling it an event, at the White House just yesterday, which was Donald Trump, the US president, his pal, his friend, held this event at the White House where we're going to see images now in a second where it was like a Tesla showroom. There were 5 Tesla vehicles on the lawn outside the White House in Washington, D.C. We see Donald Trump there with Elon Musk basically inspecting all the vehicles. And, of course, we can't forget as well that Donald Trump, he said that he was going to buy a Tesla. He quite liked this red Tesla that we're seeing here. And he reiterated that desire to own a Tesla again. And also, you know, we can't forget one very important message here, which is, you know, Donald Trump has said he's going to buy Tesla, but in previous months and weeks and years even, he's essentially campaigned against electric vehicles. So we're seeing once again Donald Trump flipping how he feels about a certain topic. And he was quite angry in many respects about how the share price of Tesla had slumped on Monday. And I'm actually going to just bring something up here on your screens, which is the share price of Tesla, which dropped. We mentioned it at the top of the show. We can just see it there. Right now, it's worth €227.15. It's up. It's actually gone up, but it actually slumped down on Monday to around 200 and the lowest point there, €210. Now, if we go back to December, it was at 461. So if you have shares in Tesla, you've basically lost, what is that, around half of the worth of your stock in just a few months. So pretty incredible. Now, it was the worst day for Tesla in biggest one-day fall in 4.5 years, and that happened on Monday, of course. Now, Donald Trump, going back to his anger, he said that a lot of the protests that were taking place against Tesla and Tesla garages, which we'll see in a couple of minutes, because that's been happening in previous weeks and months, particularly in the United States, but across the world as well. He described it as essentially domestic terrorism, which is pretty strong language to be calling essentially a protest which is taking place in the US and across the world. He said that they're harming a great American company. Now, if we actually look at some of these protests, I think it's quite interesting to see what's been happening, because before I get into the reasons why these have been happening, I think it's always nice to see these visuals, which I'm going to bring in. Oh, we're seeing the Germany pictures here first, which was back in January, where a group of people projected images of Elon Musk on the side of the Tesla factory, which is just outside Berlin. Pretty strong images there saying Heil Tesla. Now, you know, essentially what they're sort of saying is that this salute that he made in the United States was very similar to a Nazi salute. He claims it isn't, but you know, I'll leave that up to the
discussion it generated in Germany.
There was
because,
a lot of
that kind of hand gesture, you show that to a German audience, they know exactly what this is, no matter what the discourse in the US was.
Yeah, but, I mean, he was saying it wasn't, but you know, once again, I'll leave it up to the viewer to decide. But like you say, here in Germany, that caused a lot of controversy, to say the least. But I just want to bring in Michelle. If you could bring up the screen here on my computer. We're just seeing some of the protests that are taking place and have been taking place in the United States. We've seen people arrested. They've been getting arrested because they've been protesting outside. These images are actually in New York from this week. Donald Trump, as I said, has been describing these people as domestic terrorists, essentially, for simply protesting against Elon Musk for his role in government, which I'll get to now in a second. I also want to show you here some of this garage in a Tesla dealership on the other side of the United States in Oregon. So people have been, you know, essentially, you know, destroying cars or whatever of Tesla cars. And there's also been people, which is kind of a funny anecdote, putting stickers on their Tesla vehicles and sort of saying that they're, you know, they bought their car before Elon Musk came to office. And I want to talk about this issue about him being in office, of course, because a lot of the anger is geared towards the fact that they feel that this is a man who has not been voted in to office, having quite an important role in what appears to be a sort of a government role that he's basically being given. Yeah. He's unelected because he's in charge of this department known as DOGE. This is the Department of Government Efficiency, where he's been brought in to basically dismantle government agencies, and thousands of people have lost their jobs. So government jobs, federal jobs. And I do want to stress one thing. DOGE is not a government agency. It is, or a government department. It's created, which has to be created by actually an act of Congress. It's a temporary organization. And what it appears is happening is that the only person that DOGE, as in Elon Musk, actually has to answer to is Donald Trump. Yeah. So all of these images and all of this anger is very much geared towards the fact that we have this person who's unelected in the United States making quite serious decisions in government, or at least influencing the president of the United States. And then on top of that, of course, he is the owner of many, many, many different companies, not only Tesla. He has an incredible business empire. I want to bring up this image as well. If Michelle could bring that up as well, we can see all the companies that he is in charge of. So we see here that he is, of course, the CEO of Tesla Cars. He also has SpaceX. He's the CEO. That's a rocket producer. He has X Corp, which is formerly known as Twitter, so X, social media. He owns the majority of that platform. Then you have Neuralink CEO and co-founder. Neuralink is essentially developing a brain-computer interface. That the idea is that it allows devices and machines to sort of be controlled through sort of something in your brain or an implant. And then there's XAI, which is an artificial intelligence company. And then the one which I quite like the name of, which is The Boring Company. He's the co-CEO and founder. Now, anyone who doesn't know anything about this, I have to be honest, the first time I heard this, I was like, The Boring Company? What is this?
It's anything but boring.
It's everything but boring. But he is boring because it actually provides construction, tunneling, and drilling services.
That type of boring.
That type of boring, exactly.
Okay.
But you have to give it. It is a pretty good name.
Yeah, but they were the company that they were going to be engaged in Hyperloop, right? That's what I meant by the interesting part of
and of course, you know, over the years he's had, I mean, he's had his sort of his fingers in many pies. So we're seeing a man here who is worth a lot of money. He's the richest man in the world. Okay, he's lost a lot this week, but he's still got, you know, what about, I think the last figure I saw was like 326 billion euros or dollars is what he's worth. It could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more, but I mean, at that stage, does it really matter whether you're worth
someone's comfortable.
Someone's written here, Rick, Elon Musk is still looking to get richer. He wants to be the first trillionaire.
Yeah.
So,
well, throw a couple of dollars this way. I'm sure at this table
just a couple of dollars, yeah.
But I mean,
we can help you out with that. Yeah.
I mean, I think the important thing to take away from what I'm saying here is that we have a man who is, you know, he has all these big companies. We know Tesla, obviously. Then I've mentioned all the others, and I think often people are aware that he's involved in other companies, but the significance, which I'm sure, Kassandra, you'll be speaking about, of his involvement in these companies, plus his involvement in the US government, scares a lot of people, not just in the United States, but across the world. And I mean, it's had an impact, and there's a lot of anger, not just in the US, but here in Germany as well. Like we saw before, the protest, the number of people buying Teslas, for example, here in Germany has slumped. This is the biggest market for EVs in the European Union. Right. They slumped over 70%. Big markets like France as well, the Netherlands, Scandinavian countries as well, Portugal. The numbers have dropped. So it's, you know, is there a link?
I mean, it's interesting to point out, someone's pointed out here, he's criticised pretty much every government at some point, and here in Germany supported the Alternative for Germany, and there was quite an outcry of sort of accusations that he was meddling, really. So
absolutely, and there was a lot of anger, as we know, here in Germany during the election
from a lot of the politicians, and they were pretty open about it.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's a good point to just bring Kassandra in. I mean, is all this linked? I mean, Pablo showed earlier the share price of Tesla is going up marginally, but over the past few months it has dropped quite a bit, almost at half its levels from December, if memory serves. Is this connected to his time in office? Or, well, unelected office, but he's a government employee. He's been confirmed by the White House. Is this connected to that, or are there other factors behind this stock crash or slump?
There's definitely connections. Some of them might be secondary connections, maybe not primary, but there's definitely connections here, right? One important thing I want to note here is that it's not like the EV market around the world is shrinking and then Tesla is also shrinking. Other EVs are selling at a faster rate while the Tesla share is shrinking. So there's other car companies that are selling more electric vehicles, even as Tesla's selling fewer and fewer. And some of these numbers, like I knew them from covering this topic, but when you look at them, they're really staggering. Here in Germany, in 2023, this is right after the German factory just outside of Berlin gets going, over 60,000 across all models Teslas were sold. Then in 2024, we would think, okay, maybe the economy is feeling a little bit better. It's been middling here in Germany, but maybe people are feeling a bit more flush. There's more of these German-made EVs that are being produced. And when I've gone to the factory and like spoken to people who have Teslas in that area, they're proud of having they were proud of having German-made Teslas. But now in 2024, under 17,000 across all Tesla models were sold. It's just off a cliff.
17.
It's under 17,000, down from the previous year, just under 64,000.
Wow,
so just massive, massive decline. And so there's a lot going on here. There's more EV models available, so there's frankly just more competition. more governments are also getting rid of their tax credits to buy electric vehicles. We've seen that go away in Germany. Ironically, Musk, during the campaign, as Trump was kind of saying, oh, we don't want these tax credits, Musk was agreeing with him. He was saying things like, oh, it's my competitors who need these credits. We don't need these credits. Whether there's a direct connection there is hard to say, but it's definitely a lot of overlap for sure.
Okay. At this point, I'd just like to bring in two other experts who will be with us through this discussion. I'd like to bring in Matt Binder, who is a journalist with Mashable. He's on the top of your screen there. Hi, Matt. Thanks for making it. He writes in broadcast and technology and politics. And Professor Nimish Desai, who is a professor in law and finance at Harvard Law School and Harvard Business School. Professor Hammer, how do you find the time to teach both these things and such deep subjects? It amazes me, but thanks for joining us, both of you gentlemen. I don't know if you got a bit of what Kassandra was saying, but just in terms of staying with just Tesla, Matt, if I can just come to you, we're trying to look at the connection between the protests that we are seeing against Tesla factories and Tesla showrooms and Tesla vehicles, and wondering if that is connected to Elon Musk's time in office. I mean, there is this hashtag Tesla takedown, if I'm right. Do you see that that's having a major impact on the Tesla business?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about what Tesla's sort of traditional customer base was, you could easily say it was, environmentally conscious liberals. And Musk has clearly done everything in his power to repel them away from him and his companies, and Tesla being the most forward of Musk's companies, at least when it comes to consumers. It's the one where you can actually purchase a product. That's where people are saying, you know what, I don't want to take part in this. They can't boycott SpaceX. They don't buy his rockets. That's mostly government. But they can say, we're not going to buy your EV vehicles. And that's what they're saying. And they're showing up at these showrooms, and they're trying to let other people know too that if you purchase a Tesla, we view you as having the same sort of ideologies that Musk is espousing and has been for the past few years, only especially now that he's tied himself directly to the Trump government.
Professor Desai, I wanted to come to you. Matt was talking about environmentally conscious liberals, and I have here the wonderful article that you wrote in the New York Times opinion section titled "Musk's Tweet-Fueled Bubble May Be About to Burst." In that, there is one line in which you say, Mr. Musk's soft underbelly is essentially the inflated expectations of his rabid following. Are you referring to the environmentally conscious liberals as his rabid following there?
No, actually, I'm referring to what I think his real genius has been, which is the development of a financial cult. And it is a group of investor followers / fans who have determined that Musk, despite his middling business success, frankly, is worthy of escalating valuations, which in turn have been the source of his wealth, and which, of course, in turn are the source of his power. And so the point of that article is simply to suggest that once those inflated expectations begin to fall, we can see an unwinding rather rapidly, because ultimately it is a financial cult more than it is anything else. And much as he understands how to use financial markets to garner wealth and power, which is what he's done, those financial markets can turn. And when they turn, they dismantle wealth and power. And in that sense, financial markets are an underappreciated guardrail against what is happening in the US today and with his agenda.
Professor Jared Reed here, thank you so much for your time. We have a question sort of in that direction of what you were just talking about. And when you were talking about, I guess, this cult and the fans around Elon Musk, someone has written, what do the stakeholders in Elon's businesses, maybe you can include these types of fans, but maybe the traditional stakeholders too, what do they think about his antics and destroying the company stock?
Well, that is what we're going to find out. So they have been rabid because he has provided them with stellar returns, particularly in Tesla. Having said that, for the last 4 to 5 years, Tesla stock has kind of been dead in the water, has not moved. And of course, the operational performance, you all were hinting at this earlier, is quite problematic. And so I think people are getting very concerned. So what is happening? In effect, his lead that was garnered over the last 15 years in the EV market is withering. BYD, obviously, is a sizable competitor. Other domestic companies in the US are sizable competitors, and in fact, producing products that are some ways much better. He has engaged in a very vicious price war, which is deflating the value of the brand. And ultimately, we see that in volume numbers, as you were mentioning, in Germany and at home. And ultimately, this is the kind of thing that can make every investor who, for example, says, oh, he made me a lot of money in Tesla, so I should plow him money in SpaceX, they can make them reconsider everything. And when that happens, and he may be levered to some degree, then that can be quite devastating to his wealth, but also to his power.
And therefore, we saw President Donald Trump virtually using the White House, it would appear, as a Tesla showroom and parading all these cars and saying, well, buy a Tesla, it is good. Matt, if I can just ask you, I mean, is that, we were discussing that in the team here because we were thinking, I think we were talking about this would probably not be legal in Europe. We're not really entirely sure about that.
Entirely
but Matt,
sure.
is this legal in the United States? A president essentially endorsing a product in the White House, for the lack of a better expression?
Well, I mean, everything's legal in the United States now. We have a president who's partaking in cryptocurrency grifts. I mean, literally selling unregistered securities to his fan base under the disguise of it just being a meme. You know, we are in sort of uncharted territory. I called it on one of my podcasts, the age of the grift. I mean, there's just whatever they want to do, they'll find a way to do it. And because they basically control every lever of government, they'll get away with it for now, at least. You know, I think what you saw online when this happened was the online right was pointing to how, you know, Joe Biden, for example, had showcased a number of American car companies during his time in office. And like in one of the press junkets, they had Biden look at a Jeep or something in front of the White House. I think the huge difference there between what Musk and Trump are doing with Tesla is that the president of Jeep wasn't a special government employee under the administration. And Joe Biden wasn't out there cutting an ad for Jeep saying this is how much they cost, this is how you get financing for it. It was just your regular sort of promotion of an American-made product, which if that's all what Trump did, that wouldn't be out of the norms. But he was running through all the different options and how much you can get them for and the financing terms and straight up saying how you should buy to promote and help Musk and Tesla. I mean, this was
he had
over the...
He had a list of the Tesla models and the pricing. I think there was something on X. Yeah. We don't have that, but maybe we can show that later. But Kassandra, I mean, can I just expand it beyond Tesla? I mean, Pablo just shared that whole plate of that complicated connection between the various companies that Elon Musk runs. What we are seeing with Tesla, the backlash, are we seeing that with the other companies as well? Or are the other companies sort of...
Tesla is getting the most heat, for sure. But Twitter is also seeing some brand toxicity.
You mean X?
Sorry, not to dead name the social media platform. But yeah, X, excuse me, has a lot of brand toxicity behind it. I was looking at one survey earlier, and I believe it was 4% of marketers in a recent survey said that they thought it was a safe place to advertise for their brand, comparing that to, I believe it was Google, that was about 39%. So a huge discrepancy there. So X is definitely taking some heat here. And it's also, if you look at it, the content moderation is completely different now. The kind of users that are on there are completely different now. All of this is definitely related. But something that Matt was saying kind of brought me back to 2021. This electric vehicle showcase that happened at the White House. A very maybe like villain origin story for Mr. Musk at that point was it was an invitation for American EV makers, but the biggest American electric vehicle maker, Tesla, wasn't invited. And he posted about it on X at the time saying it was pretty odd that I wasn't invited. And there's some speculation that maybe that might be one of the things that radicalized Elon as well.
Do we know why? Is there anything that came out about
there
why?
was part of the problem is that, from what I've gathered, is that there were some UAW, United Auto Worker representatives there, and Musk famously does not like unions. None of the shops are unionized. Whether there was going to be a union even in the German Brandenburg facility, it was up in the air for a long time, but there was an idea that there might be friction there.
Professor Desai, if I can bring you in over here, you know, we're talking about electric vehicles. Let's go back to Tesla, electric vehicles, and President Trump endorsing it. Although you have a president who has basically removed the green subsidies and is removing the subsidies on electric vehicles that were introduced by the previous term, and yet here he is saying, well, buy a Tesla, it is really good. Is there a contradiction between presidential policy and presidential actions here?
Well, if you're looking for consistency, the Trump White House is not the place to find it. So yeah, there are lots of internal contradictions in everything that is being said and being done, frankly. And it is a mess of contradictions. Now, pundits will look for sanity there and look for consistent pieces of logic. I think it's more likely to be pretty random actions in all different directions in a very gut instinctual way, which is, I think, the way these individuals think about the world. So yes, there are lots and lots of contradictions, and the least of it, which is, you know, kind of peddling EVs on the lawn, but simultaneously taking out the credits. I will just mention those carbon credits are a non-trivial part of Musk's performance, which is to say, in Tesla, there are several $billion of revenue, which are effectively pure profit, which is on trading of those carbon credits. So it is a part of his empire. And the other thing I would just mention is, I think it is worthwhile. I thought that chart you put up was fascinating about all the different links between those businesses.
We can put that up again.
I have it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite fascinating. It is worth acknowledging that, you know, most of those things are now quite problematic and not doing well. So Solar City is a great example of a business that has faltered tremendously and then was taken over by Tesla and now basically doesn't exist. The Boring Company, Neuralink, X, these are all pretty dreamy companies, but have little attachment to reality in the near future. So I think we really need to rethink the genius that is here, or that people purport to be here. One of the things I do in my piece is make clear that the real business titans of the last quarter century, of which there are many, really built world-changing businesses, and he is not one of them. That is a group that includes people like, whether you like them or not, you know, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, lots of folks. And what Musk has achieved has no comparison with what they've achieved. It's just his wealth is far greater. And the only way to understand that is to understand the investor cult that is underneath him. And that is what he's used so powerfully.
But he also got some funding from the government, and maybe this is where I want to bring you in,
Absolutely.
Matt. I was looking at some of the figures, and I came upon something like $38 billion in aid, funding, and government orders for Tesla and SpaceX over the past 2 decades. So here you have two companies that Musk runs that seem to have benefited from aid from the government. And here you have Elon Musk running a government agency that is out to cut wasteful expenditure. Do we know what is the definition of wasteful expenditure? For example, does he look at all this aid that other companies get as wasteful as well? But that's for you, Matt. Sorry.
Oh, it's for me. Oh, yeah. I think. Sorry about that. Yes, I mean, waste to the Trump administration, which includes Musk, is basically anything they ideologically disagree with. I mean, it's crystal clear because there's not been the whole point of DOGE was to root out, you know, abuse and fraud and waste, and they throw out all these things that they've cut, but nothing they've cut has proven to be abuse, fraud, or waste. There's been nothing. It's all been things that they just ideologically disagree with. If there was abuse, fraud, and waste to be proven in any of these cuts, then ostensibly there would also be some sort of laws broken, and there would be charges filed, or at least investigations started about, you know, who did the wrongdoing, who committed a crime, who committed fraudulent activity. But there's none of that. They haven't proven it. They haven't even made the argument of that. They just keep throwing out these buzzwords and saying that there's these cuts that they've made, which, by the way, they've revised numerous times to lower the number after coming out with these, broad swaths of billions of dollars that they've cut, which turns out to be much, much lower. And often, in many instances, they basically...
But they still remain popular, right, Matt? I mean, I think I was seeing a figure, some polling, I think more than 70% of people polled believe in the work that DOGE is doing. Is that right?
Right. I mean, I think it's mainly because the broader American public are basically detached from all this. They hear... like a lot of these polls, it's all dependent on how the actual question is worded. Like if you tell someone, how do you feel about what Elon Musk set out to do with Doge, and that is to root out government waste, fraud, and abuse, who's going to disagree with it when it's when that question is posed to them like that? Of course, I want to get rid of government waste, fraud, and abuse. I want my taxpayer money to go towards good things that actually are worthwhile. I'm sure, though, if you actually broke down exactly what Doge has been doing, and that has been basically so far from the main cuts that I've seen has been to medical research, to national parks, the gutting of the park rangers, which is beloved by the American public. People go to the national parks. I think they would disagree with that. And like the professor said too, a lot of this is still also that cult of Musk that I think sort of gives the idea that he's much more popular and beloved than he actually is, because they are a hardcore fan base, and so far they followed him through thick and thin.
There's just one question I want to put to, hi, it's Pablo here, I'm the reporter today. It's actually, I want to put it to the professor just on what Matt was saying there with regards to all these people who've lost their jobs, essentially. I was reading a few articles and listened to a few different podcasts where they were saying that a lot of people have lost their jobs and there's essentially, it's illegal what's happened. Like they can't really lose their jobs the way they've lost their jobs. But because you're kind of dealing with this massive machine, it's sort of practically impossible for them to actually take out legal action because it would be too expensive, it would be too long. Is that actually the case? Is it sort of is there anything that people can do who've lost their jobs? Or is it just sort of pointless for them to actually even go about legally trying to challenge this?
I don't think we know yet. I think the courts are working, and they don't work at the speed of markets. They work at their own pace, which is good. And we are finding out what will happen. So, for example, within some of the grants that were made by USAID that were rescinded, I think there was an effort to say, well, you've already made those grants and you've made a commitment. You can't go back on that. And I think that's been somewhat successful. But this will take time to work out. I think we all should just remember this has been, 2 months of really rapid activity, which we are just coming to terms with. And so courts are coming to terms with it. The press is coming to terms with it. Markets are coming to terms with it. So part of the strategy is, of course, shock and awe. And that is an effective strategy, perhaps. But to really understand the effects of all this will take time. And I will also just mention that, Doge is interesting both because of all these cuts that you mentioned, but it is also interesting because of, I think, again, the inflated expectations of what they can do. So the notion that we can solve significant amounts of government spending issues with these kinds of staff cuts is fantastical. It is not true because the money goes to entitlements, defense, typically what we call non-discretionary spending. And so, and I don't think they're going to touch that. If they did, that would be really interesting. But there isn't enough money there to kind of match up with the claims they're making about how much money they're going to save. So it is quite seismic on a personal level to lose your job if you are at USAID. I don't mean to diminish that in any way. But the notion that this is actually, not something more than rounding error, I think is wrong.
One thing I want to elaborate on here is who exactly is being targeted, or what kind of businesses are being targeted by Doge. I was looking at this breakdown of spending by the New York Times, and they said of all the contracts that do business with the U.S. government, it's about 23%. But the contracts represented of these small businesses on the Doge site are 29%. So more contracts than the government actually deals with that are just small businesses are represented on the Doge site. Same with minority-owned businesses. Of all the contracts that the U.S. government deals with, it represents 10% of spending. But on the Doge site, these cuts, it's 17%. Contracts by women or businesses owned by women, it's 5% of all of them, overrepresented on the Doge site by 11%. And then nonprofits, same thing, 5% of all contracts, and contracts on the Doge site is 11%. So there seems to be some low-hanging fruit from the Doge perspective of who can be targeted, and that seems to be reflected so far on the Doge website.
And it seems to be following the MAGA talking points as well,
exactly,
right? I mean,
no DEI, that kind of a thing, or who's qualified and who's not qualified for a
which
job.
just brings me to the question, this is for you, Matt. I mean, what is the oversight here? We haven't really heard of any oversight. If you're an elected representative or if you're a special government employee who's been appointed in a function, there is some sort of oversight, congressional oversight, if Congress has appointed that committee. But this doesn't seem to be happening here. So what is the oversight? And do you think that the kind of public reaction that we are seeing outside Tesla showrooms, for example, is that the oversight that would work in this case?
Right. Yeah, I think the sort of issue here is the Trump administration is attacking this as a sort of under the idea of who's going to stop us. The Republican Party controls everything right now. I mean, House, Senate, White House, and the Supreme Court, really. I mean, who's going to stop them? The Democrats have, I think, in a lot of ways, even though they are basically powerless in any sort of thing they do, it would strictly be symbolic. I think a lot of their voter base views them as even sort of underperforming there, not even doing, a lot of them not even doing the symbolic gestures of standing up to Trump and Musk. So I think what you are seeing is, the people who do understand what's going on at these protests are coming out and saying, we got to take matters into our own hands and let these guys know that, there will be blowback from the public. There will be repercussions for what you do, regardless of the fact that maybe our leaders are failing us. We'll make sure that that we don't agree with it. And in a lot of ways, I think what's going to happen here, to piggyback what the professor said earlier, is another one of these groups that will end up being disillusioned, and we're already sort of seeing it, is not the MAGA people, but Trump voters who are sort of not so political year-round, just sort of when it comes time to be election season. We've already seen people out there come out and say, I voted for Trump and now I lost my job. That's not what I voted for him to go after this, not me. And so now they're upset. And I do think little by little, and I do think maybe they won't go after defense, but I do think, Musk has already said that entitlements like Social Security are the world's biggest Ponzi scheme. I do think that's what they've set their sights on next. And I do think when they do go for that, I don't think they're ready for the blowback that they'll receive from even that Trump voter base that, again, not the hardcore Musk fans and the MAGA faithful. They will feel pain and still support Trump and Musk, but there are a lot of people who voted for Trump who aren't in that world who will turn against them, and I think that will happen if Musk gets his way.
Professor Desai, I know you might have to leave, but if you do need to leave, just please say so. Just in addition to what Matt was saying, there is also the question of a conflict of interest, right? I mean, here is a businessman who's been receiving money from the government, and there is something like, 11 federal agencies with some 30 investigations into Elon Musk's companies. Here you have Elon Musk now appearing to be in a position to be able to regulate the regulators. Is there not a conflict of interest here that is so apparent that something needs to be done about it?
Well, I think that's certainly true. But again, I think if we're thinking about conflicts of interest, the administration is rife with them. And this is just one example of it. I think what's of interest to me is that perhaps Musk understood the limits of this investor cult, and that only by effectively becoming political could he do an end run around the efforts that could have ultimately undone him. And that is kind of his latest and final high wire act, which is to try to outrun the efforts of people who would outdo him by controlling effectively governmental apparatus. I would also just say that, to what the guardrails are, I really do think we have to think about financial markets, because he's not, there's not going to be another election until the congressional election in a year and a half, and then no presidential election for the next 3.5, 4 years. So there's no mechanism, unlike in Europe and some other parliamentary democracies, to have some kind of a break. But I think financial markets are powerful, and one way to understand that is, if Bitcoin is at 40,000 and the Nasdaq is at 14,000 and the 10-year yield is at 5+, he is going to be in trouble. Mm-hmm. And it's a Liz Truss-like moment. Now, it won't have the same consequences as had for the UK Prime Minister, because they lived in a parliamentary democracy. But that kind of a moment can happen, and it can happen fast. My apologies as I have to run, but thank you so much.
Thanks, Professor Desai, for joining us. Thanks for this time that you had. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you so much. We've just had a question in from the chat. Maybe I'll put this to you, Kassandra. The professor just mentioned Europe, right? And John's asking, it's hard for me to watch this from the US and wonder why Europe is so concerned about what Musk is doing. Why is or should Europe be concerned?
I think that almost is reversed in my head, because it seems that we've seen the consequences of the meddling in the US, and I think that's what people are concerned about here would be the big question that I have, because Musk over the last few years, it's not just the US that these facilities are being built into, right? So let's look just here at Germany. The plant got off the ground in the last few years. It's been in the works for a few years before that. And then there was questions raised about whether or not the company was following correct safety guidelines, whether it was respecting the right to the right to unionize, whether it was dumping pollutants into groundwaters in this very small kind of village next to a very marshy area there. So I think what folks are seeing here is the influence that he has had on politicians, and then what they're willing to do to keep that influence, right? We were speaking earlier about this financial cult. Well, those people can turn into voters. They can keep people, elected officials in office. And I think that's what folks don't like here. It would be my read on it.
Yeah.
No, I think just at this point, I mean, Matt, you're still with us, right? I don't know. Yeah, there you go.
Yes,
Matt,
yes.
Just stay with us. I'd just like to sort of go to Cherry, who has been looking at the chat, just to get an idea of the mood in the chat, and we can just have a look at that, and then we can move on to something else.
I have to say it's quite polarizing in the chat. Many people are saying that let's boycott Elon Musk, boycott Tesla, but there are also people who are defending him. There's also a criticism to our poll, actually. Nacho71AR is saying that it's an unfair survey, an option for actually wanting to pitch him with the government doing good, so to speak. He's a made man after all. So we see also support for Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. But also I want to point out that just now, I think it was the professor who pointed out this word investor cult, and it seems to echo with a lot of people, actually. Jim Bob was saying that he is a cult leader. No, sorry, this is Max Silver, actually. He is a cult leader at Techno-Futurist Code. Someone pointed out something quite interesting about this code idea. Nile Chatuvedi, I hope I didn't pronounce it wrong, was saying that obsession with genius billionaires and forming a social code isn't anything new in America. 100 years ago, there was a code of personality for Rockefeller, 30 years ago for Bill Gates, now Elon Musk. So I think this is quite a fruitful discussion in the chat.
It's interesting too, people are calling themselves former Elon fanboys.
Oh yeah.
So I used to be an Elon fanboy.
Do they have those stickers as well? Do they have those stickers as well? Matt, I just wanted to sort of jump in with you into Elon Musk and his politics. And the main question that we haven't really been able to answer, which is why we had the poll that we have, is why is Elon Musk in government? What is in it for him? Why did he volunteer to be there?
Right. So I think there's a few things here. I mean, obviously, Elon Musk's companies get a lot of money from the government, billions and billions of dollars over the years for his companies like SpaceX and Tesla. I mean, SpaceX would basically not be if it wasn't for for the government. And Tesla was actually one of the companies that the Obama administration helped bail out in the early years of Tesla. It's amazing that this is a guy who you were looking at the chat and there's all these people who were saying they were former fanboys, and it's interesting because he was someone who was fairly for most people seemingly apolitical. He wasn't controversial. They liked him because it seemed like he was just a guy who was a tech guy who didn't partake in any sort of politics or anything that would really get you too mad. Maybe you disagree with him about something technical, but that's not something that would radicalize you against him. But he chose to jump into this, and part of that reason, on top of what I just said, is also I think that he is in a bubble. Like when you look at those early messages that he sent when he was first considering to buy Twitter, to people like his ex-wife, Tallulah Riley. They were discussing how they needed to buy, like she was telling him like, oh, I need you to buy Twitter. And he was like, oh yeah, we need to do this. And the reason they were talking about doing it was because they wanted to help out by unbanning some of their favorite conservative influencers. And I really do think that they think the vast majority of the public is with them. And obviously there are a lot of people with them, but I think they are so deep into this bubble that they think that this is the broadly popular position instead of one that at least half of the country, or at least half of people who maybe used to like Musk would say, hey, this is something that would repel me from you. They are in a bubble, I think. And that's why they go out there and talk the way they do too about the things they would like to cut. I really do think that a lot of this, even just like the radicalization of Musk, where his politics went. Sure, it had to do with Biden supporting American-made EV companies except Tesla. But it also had to do with Musk surrounding himself with people who were increasingly themselves becoming right-wing or were straight up right-wing influencers. I mean, this is a guy who at the same time too comes from, seemingly upbringing in South Africa that was at the very least apartheid adjacent, if not outright supporting. I mean, you look at his father and his grandfather and what they did in their life. I think, this is what you get when you have someone brought up on all those values, given a ton of money, and then given that the rest of the cards they were dealt with, the falling into this crowd, being shunned by a president that he wanted the adulation from, and I think this all comes together, and this is what you get.
I did want to talk to you about South Africa, but just to rewind back about and talk about Twitter. Elon Musk likes using the term fork in the road. Was the purchase of Twitter a fork in the road for Elon Musk's, descent into a more right-wing political agenda? And if so, is Elon Musk actually himself, is his personal politics conservative and right-wing?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. He's a straight-on, full-on right-winger now. I mean, you could contend whether this was always the case and he was just better at hiding it, but it's indisputable. I mean, he's come out and he's voiced support for pretty much every right wing, and not just right wing. We're not talking like center right or your traditional conservative. We're talking about like far right parties. In some cases, parties that have echoed neo-Nazi ideology. He has given air and promoted conspiracy theories that are anti-Semitic and white supremacist. He has basically put on a national stage this issue that is, you basically hear from everyone in South Africa that this whole, racism or apartheid-like condition against white farmers is non-existent. Yet he's acting like this is the biggest issue of our time. I think without a doubt he has far-right politics. He has far-right ideology. He has ingratiated himself with these groups and with these influencers and with these talking heads. I think it started before he bought Twitter. I think Twitter has just further radicalized him. Mm-hmm. I think it, in terms of broadly speaking, what has Twitter done to the public? It's hard to tell because I do think Twitter is a microcosm of the broader public. I don't think most people are actually on Twitter. It's easily the least popular of like the major social media platforms, which still says a lot. It's still up there with the major ones.
Weren't you suspended from Twitter by Elon Musk?
I was in December of 2022. I was part of that first major group of suspensions when he suspended personally 6 journalists who were reporting on him and Twitter. The specific issue was how he banned the Elon jet tracker, which basically used public data to, essentially just follow in real time where his private jet was. Again, that's not really following where he is, because it could only take you from airport to airport, and it doesn't know if Elon Musk is actually on the jet. A lot of times it basically was tracking like when the jet's pilot had to, take the plane in for, for a gas refill or something like that. And again, it was all based on public information. And I had posted after he had banned it how, this goes against what Twitter traditionally has done. It was based on the ban was based on a rule change just hours earlier. Didn't even give the Elon jet tracker a chance to, change how it worked so it could abide by the rules. And I had simply said the Elon jet tracker moved over to Instagram, and that was enough to get me banned for apparently pointing people to where you can find the Elon jet tracker on another platform.
Matt, you're getting some praise in the chat. Someone's written, you're doing something right when you're suspended by the people with power.
Right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Particularly for people who talk about free speech, right?
Right. Yes. I mean, that's the thing, too. Like, a lot of these guys talk about free speech, and then they don't really mean free speech in a general sense. It basically just means, we've seen it on Twitter. What does free speech mean? It means that they have the ability to say slurs now without, like, getting an infraction on Twitter and getting a temporary suspension or something. Because you also have seen that Musk has been fine with banning speech he doesn't like. In my case, it was the Elon jet tracker reporting. In other case, basically, if you post the term cis or cisgender, on Twitter, you get a warning label placed on your post saying this is hate speech and that it will not be shared in the algorithm. This is selective free speech for basically what they agree with. For anything else, it's not so much anything goes. It's, the new regime says this is wrong speak.
I want to jump in on that. Like, the bigger question being, is this Musk's true heart, these true politics, right? This is a man who dead names his own trans daughter in public. So this is very close to him. This isn't just policies that affect other people or cut other people's jobs. He is not afraid to live his politics, so to speak. He has many children by several women. He dead names his own trans daughter, calls her by her previous name, and won't acknowledge the gender that she lives as today. So this is something that he's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk as well.
How is this playing out for Elon Musk in the business circles that he also does move around in? What is the view on Elon Musk as a business leader by other business leaders?
Looking at just the numbers right now, because that takes some of the emotion out of it, I was looking for what's sparking this sell-off that we've seen since the Tesla, for example, stock peak just after the election. And James Murdoch, the son of Rupert Murdoch, actually just this week dumped nearly $13 million worth of Tesla shares. And he's not alone. In recent weeks, we've also seen some other insiders, like Tesla's CFO, dumping tens of millions of shares. So there seems to be some of the air coming out of these business leaders.
Tesla's own CFO.
CFO, yeah.
Okay.
Tesla's CFO also dumped tens of millions of these shares in the last month. So whether the confidence is leaving some of these people who are not the diehard fanboys, it seems to be happening, because the stock, from my vantage point, we use terms like massive sell-off, dive, all of this, but it's really more in correction territory right now. It hasn't gone below where it was a year ago, which was about 163 euros a share. That's the line for me. If it starts to go below that number before where it was in March of 2024, then we know that this has really become a toxic asset.
That's a good point you make, because someone else made the exact same point about a correction in the chat here.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of confidence that when you had Musk on the campaign trail, right, in September and October, and then he's doing things later, like bringing out a chainsaw and stuff like that, okay, this might be a guy that if he gets into government, whether this is ethical or not, he might be able to clear away some of the restrictions that hamper his business. Like once he's in there, he can make the road smoother for SpaceX or Tesla or whatever it is. So a lot of people got invested in that, maybe literally, or like thought that would help these companies. But now they're seeing, okay, he's not necessarily making the road smoother for Tesla's, no pun intended, or for SpaceX. Things are getting more difficult for these companies. We're seeing these quarterly reports that are showing these, even the used car value of Teslas has absolutely tanked. Like so many people are getting rid of their Teslas that the used car value is going down a lot. Some as low as like 15,000 for a Tesla. So this confidence, like, oh yeah, maybe he's going to know something from the inside. The air is going out of that.
And this is with Elon Musk at the wheel. Oh, wow. No. I just had to sort of throw that in there. Matt, I wanted to sort of ask you, expand this a bit and talk about Elon Musk's boss, Donald Trump. What is the equation between the two men? And the reason I ask this is because we keep seeing reports, we keep discussing as well, and asking this question, when will this relationship sour? When will Elon Musk become more popular than Donald Trump and maybe leading to some sort of a split? Just talk us through this relationship. What is it based on?
Sure. I think for Musk, there could be a number of things, but for Trump, I think it's pretty obvious what it's based on, and it's based on money. We've seen from the first Trump administration that anyone who got on the wrong side of Donald Trump, whether it be, disagreed with him about something or got, too big for their britches and he felt like they were maybe, possibly, potentially, even sometime in the future going to maybe overshadow him as the decision maker, even on a single thing, they would lose their job or at least be demoted in some way. With Musk, though, that hasn't happened yet. Now, there's still plenty of time for it to happen, but what Musk has that a lot of these other guys don't is this money factor. Take, for example, just what happened the other day. Excuse me. Trump did this whole sales pitch for Tesla vehicles, turning the White House into a Tesla showroom, like you said earlier. And then earlier today, it comes out that Elon Musk is suddenly thinking about donating $100 million to a political action group for Trump. I mean, as long as Elon Musk continues to satiate Trump with funding and cash flow, I think this could go much longer than any other Trump relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that Musk can't do something that can sour the relationship. I think if Musk becomes so unpopular that it starts to tank Donald Trump too, which, I mean, Donald Trump's not doing great in the approval ratings either, but I think Musk is even less popular among the American public than Trump right now. But if Trump ties that to Musk, I think maybe that could change things. I mean, Trump might love money, but I think he also loves feeling popular too. So I'm not sure which would win out when it comes to Trump. That would be the question, I guess.
We've had a question from the chat, and it's actually one that I've wondered myself too. Someone's asked, how does Elon Musk have time for all this? They've said, you've written here, running so many companies, running around in the White House and posting on X all day, every day. How does he fit it into his normal 24-hour day that we all have?
Right. And I think people should actually look at this a little broader. This isn't like how has Musk's life changed now? Like, how is he doing this now that he's part of the administration? I think what people should really be looking at is the fact that nothing's really changed for Musk, actually, if you think about it. He might be doing more work now, but that's because he's doing work with DOGE, whereas he didn't really run his companies. I mean, I think this is even a broader thing. You can look at all these sort of tech billionaires or, very wealthy billionaires as a whole. They built their success off the back of their workers. I mean, Elon Musk is not a rocket scientist, yet people keep, pouring him with his fan base, at least, gives him all the credit in the world every time SpaceX does something great. I mean, sure, he's involved in creating the company and hiring the right people, I guess, but all the actual knowledge of building those rockets and having them do what they do, that's not Musk. That's the people he hired. That's the actual experts in the field. I think what we're learning about Musk is he was fairly hands-off to begin with on a lot of these companies because it just wouldn't be possible. There's not enough hours in the day. I mean, we've already found out that one of the reasons he's one of the top players in one of these video games he plays is because the really hardcore gamers who actually play that game looked into what Musk was actually doing in one of the rare occasions he was actually live streaming him actually playing the game. And they were like, there's no way someone who is that good at the game would be doing these things in the game during a live stream. Like, this is like newbie stuff, what he's doing. And then they eventually found out, and he basically came out and admitted it to them, that he hires people to play the game for him and build his character so he can get that ranking in the game. He does this with everything. The emperor's got no clothes. I think people have to realize this. What Musk has is he was in the right place at the right time in the early days of the tech boom with things like PayPal, and he made a lot of money early on, and he was able to convince people based on this whole facade around him that he was this genius that they should invest more money into. And because he always had this money and he has this disguise, you know, he's been able to parlay into a very successful career. It's really the classic fake it till you make it. I mean, look at all the things he's promised that haven't come to fruition. He said back in like 2017, not 2017, earlier than that, I think it was like 2011 or 2012 that we'd be on Mars in 10 years. 10 years went by. He said, give it another few years. Another few years went by. We're not on Mars.
Is that really a goal?
Mars.
Is that a serious goal? Going to Mars?
Oh, there's a Wall Street Journal interview with him from 2010 or 2011 where he said in 10 years, we will be on Mars. And it didn't happen. And he just basically moved the goalpost to another, I think he said 2022 was the next place. And I don't know, maybe we went to Mars and I didn't know about it, but we didn't go to Mars, as far as I know. He also said that, you know, these boring tunnels, his boring companies, the tunnels, like the Hyperloop tunnels were going to be the future. They would be, he actually had cities all over sign deals with them. They cut high-speed rail funding because they were convinced that Elon Musk had the future of transportation with these tunnels. And 10 years on now, the only place this tunnel has been built is in Las Vegas, and it connects one hotel with the convention center. I mean, that's it. And he also promised that these tunnels would have self-driving vehicles getting people driven around. I've been on the Tesla tunnel in Las Vegas. It is people driving Teslas pulling up. You enter the Tesla and the guy drives you from point A to point B through the tunnel. It's just, and it's one lane. It's a one-lane tunnel.
So Matt, you put it like that, it looks pretty bad. But then, you know, I mean, I'm not speaking for Elon Musk, but then you look at what he's done with SpaceX, the kind of reusable rockets. I mean, that was unthinkable when NASA used to launch rockets into space. I mean, surely things like that comes out of some sort of a genius and some sort of an effort that is seem to be working, at least when it comes to space exploration.
Oh, right. I think there is, you know, Elon Musk is talented at certain things. I think he is good at basically using his money to finance things and hire the right people, or at least hire people who know the right people to hire. I mean, SpaceX obviously has very talented engineers who've been able to accomplish some real feats. And if you want to, you know, give Musk props for that, being at the, you know, the top of that and using his money to help fund that in some ways, then sure, I think there's something there. It also wouldn't be possible without government funding, though, which Musk is criticizing that everyone else uses, but not his very special use of it, because apparently it's only fine when he uses it. But again, like his fanboys attribute things to him directly. Like Musk didn't build the rockets. I'm sorry. Like, he's not the genius building the rockets. You want to call him a genius? It's in, you know, I guess building the company in terms of hiring and where to put the money, and, you know, bidding on the government contracts and convincing people to fund him. But that's his genius. It's not in building rockets or, you know, any sort of engineering marvel in Tesla's vehicles. That's his workers who did that.
Are you essentially arguing that he's just a very good manager, which is what someone has written here in the chat?
In some ways, yes, I guess he would be. But, you know, also I guess when you look at how he is able to I guess I can say he also fails in some sort of managerial things too. I mean, just look at how he's out there straight up lying about what Doge has cut. I mean, the best example was how they said that they cut, funding that was sending condoms to Hamas in Gaza, and it came out that the funding was actually for sex education for a area in Africa that's called Gaza. It had nothing to do with Gaza in the Mideast. And he just, straight up lied. And then Donald Trump repeated the lie. I mean, as a manager, the buck stops with you, and you have to take responsibility for things and correct things on the record and let people know. And there's numerous occasions where he has not done that. I mean, there's actually a third-party website that tracks who has the most community notes on Twitter. Now, community notes are the crowdsourced, which means the user base decides that, hey, this post on Twitter, X, is inaccurate, and there needs to be a fact check or a correction on it. And it's completely user-generated. And the user base as a whole has to vote on when the correction is actually shown on the post. And this third-party tracker of community notes determined that the #1 promoter of misinformation or disinformation on Twitter is actually its owner, Elon Musk. I mean, that's not a responsible manager. That's not a responsible human being. That's not responsible in any way, shape, or form. I think in a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd just like to bring Kassandra in over here. I mean, we're talking about Elon Musk not being a good manager or being a good manager, a genius, all of these things, basically stemming from his business. How much of his business style and what he's done in business is reflected in his work with Doge, for example?
He kind of goes on these hyperfixation drives, it almost seems, right? Like there have been reports since he got involved with Doge that he's sleeping at the White House. He's asking other employees to be putting in more hours, for example. But in this interview, we saw a clip of it at the beginning that he did with Larry Kudlow that was published on Monday, I believe. He's asked this question, like, how are you running all of these businesses and also this department that seems to be like overseeing every single part of the federal government? And I've not seen a man look so tired in a really long time. He did this really long pause and was like, yeah, it's really difficult. And it's like, yeah, man, it is really difficult. You're overseeing like at least 6 companies, and now you also have your hands in this pie as well. And one thing that was coming to mind for me when Matt was speaking about the fanboys is that this is something that Elon and Mr. Trump both have in common, is that they're their own biggest fanboys, right? Musk, for example, he'll retweet photos of himself, like AI-generated photos. I've got one in front of me, but folks can find these on the internet of him like looking like a Roman centurion, right? Like he likes it when people like send him this art, so to speak. He also sued for the right to call himself a founder of Tesla, even though he joined the company in 2008 and it was started in 2003. A bit of a time discrepancy there. So they're both people that are really, as businessmen, that are really about their own mythos, right? Like for a long time, when Twitter was still Twitter, he had like a picture of himself as Tony Stark, Iron Man, like as his avatar, right? Like they're their own biggest promoters, and that's really like the power of Elon and like that people view is really what drives the businesses.
Matt, just closing this up now, where do you see, I mean, look into your crystal ball, what are we going to be seeing in the next few months when it comes to Elon Musk? More cuts with Doge, or more announcements, more the Tesla stock dropping even further? What can we expect from the Elon Musk side of things?
Right. It is actually really hard to look at the crystal ball here, because this could change based on the fact that Trump has, and his administration and Republicans in Congress have all the power. Like if Tesla does fail, if Elon Musk's companies do like get to the point where there's a real problem, not just like, the stock is dropping and Trump needs to just, for show, buy a Tesla in hopes of like pumping up sales. If there's like a real issue where the government has to step in, they will, it seems like, for Musk. Like, if in a normal functioning world, a company was to fail and you could, say, oh, it looks like I project that's going to happen. You could do that. But here, I can project something like that and then be wrong because the government decided to step in and put their finger on, the thumb on the scale and change the outcome of where things are headed. So it is really hard to tell. The real question, I guess, is how long could they do this before the broader public starts to really provide blowback here. And I do think it lies with the cuts to things like Social Security. Like in the U.S., even the Republicans, even older people, retirees, people in all 50 states, red or blue, Social Security, things like Social Security and Medicare they love it. I don't know if you'll remember back in like the early years of the Obama administration, the Tea Party days, you had these right-wing Republican voters out there with signs saying government hands off my Social Security and Medicare, not realizing that it's a government program. Like government hands are all over it. That's why you get it. That's what it is. But that's how much this would, blow up in their face if they actually went after this, because it'd be broadly unpopular to take what people have come to see as this is our right. And it is Social Security, these government programs that were set up to make sure that our most vulnerable, our retirees, our elderly, that the social contract said that you work, you have a good life, you do what society expected you to do, you do what your country expected you to do, and in your final years, you can at least live comfortably. You won't be on the streets, you can at least afford the basic necessities. If Musk and Trump take that away, I think that will be the ultimate turnaround, and it does look like they have their eye on doing that.
It hits home. Matt Bindell, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing those wonderful stories that we didn't know about. I learned quite a bit from there.
Thank you for
Thanks
having
so
me.
much, Matt.
Really appreciate it.
Take care. Kassandra, where do you think he's going to go with his businesses?
I think this is going to be much like Mr. Musk's children, where we might find more surprise children or connections in the weeks or months to come. I think that Doge is going to continue doing cuts, or at least claim to be doing some of these cuts. We touched on this earlier, that this website that Doge put up, and in this interview that Mr. Musk had recently, he said, like, line by line, you can go buy it. Well, plenty of publications have gone line by line and said the math is not mathing. So I think we're going to see more pressure, but I think they're also going to be continuing to expand. And the next few months, I'm actually really interested in, because there's supposed to be a new Model Y coming out in May. And so that could be something where there are maybe Tesla fans waiting for a car that is worth the purchase price for them. So that could be something to look forward to.
Thanks for that, Kassandra. I think it's time to have a look at the poll. You've closed the poll already, right?
I closed it just a little
Where are we
earlier.
with that? Let me bring my sheet out.
Right. Let me just repeat the question to remind everyone. What's Elon Musk really after in politics? We have 863 votes. 47% voted for gaining power and control. 22% pushing his own ideology. 14% shaping civilization, and 14% says furthering his businesses.
So a clear mandate there, at least, given the options that we provided. I know some of you have complained that we didn't have very many options, but this is what we could fit in over here. 47% believe it is towards gaining more power and control. And that's something that Matt and Professor Desai were also talking about, yeah?
Yeah.
Also, I want to do a shout out to Kassandra. Someone at Russell Parker said they are their own biggest fanboys. Perfect summary of Musk and Trump. So
Thank you.
That's
it's
what we
a
like.
quote here.
Then we've come under some criticism too.
A lot of criticism, yeah.
Someone's asked, what have we ever done? How was this panel created? How many jobs have you created? How many businesses have we created? So,
I would rather not answer that question.
I would rather not answer that.
We've never claimed to be entrepreneurs, right? Would be my
exactly.
I
defense.
called myself a genius.
I'm just a poor journalist, just trying to have a discussion on things. But thanks so much for those comments. Those are the kind of comments that keep the discussion lively. Thanks for sending it.
I think it was very sobering what Matt had to say just before we go. I definitely wanted to say that, because I do think, ultimately what's happening in the United States is that a lot of people are losing their jobs. And, anecdotally, I won't even say that now, it's a long day. But speaking to friends of mine who are in the States, and they've actually spoken about people that they know who have lost their jobs. And it's often, okay, you've got jobs that are federal jobs, but a lot of private companies are linked to those federal jobs.
Correct,
and those people are also losing their jobs.
Downstream.
Which, if you actually hark back to 2008 when the crash happened, a lot of companies that were sort of getting public funding or whatever else weren't being paid, and then people were losing their jobs in the private sector. So, you know, I think it's really an awful time for a lot of people in the US, and I don't think we can stress that enough. So it's, you know, okay, we're dealing with the bigger picture here, but ultimately this boils down to, and as well what Matt said, people losing their social security payments. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, if you don't have that, then what do you have? And what happens to those people who lose their jobs? Yep. So I just kind of felt that's what I've taken away really from today's discussion.
No, that's an apt summation. Thanks everybody for being at the table.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jared.
And
Thank you so much.
I forgot. What do we do?
What do we do? We're going to say goodbye to you now. Thank you so much for your time today and your contributions to the discussion. Just a reminder, we're going to post next week's topic about 24 hours before the stream begins. So on Tuesday. Thank you very much. Take care.
See you next week. Bye.